Hey guys, it's Dr. Kirsch here. Just want to talk a little bit to you about dedicated and all of the complications and difficulties that people have with it. I found that a lot of students struggle with dedicated because it's a completely different way of studying than everything you've done in the past couple years of medical school. So I want to discuss a few topics all related to dedicated. Stay around to the end, and hopefully in a future video I'll actually go through step by step about how to make this plan on paper if needed. Starting with the first overall question that many students have, usually early on in their second year medical school, is like, the purpose of dedicated. What is the purpose of this? And the answer to that is pretty simple. The purpose of dedicated is specifically to have time dedicated, hence the name, to be able to synthesize the information that you've learned in the first 2 years of medical school. So you get a lot of information, like, sipping out of a fire hydrant is the analogy people use. But what people struggle with is then taking all that discrete information, in each block that you have, and then combining that information, being able to show that you know this material in time for a standardized exam, specifically the USMLE or COMLEX examinations. So that is the purpose of dedicated, to synthesize all that information that you've learned. Secondly, what is the problem? So many people have a problem with dedicated, and that's what I found. I found that a lot of students will approach me and all of a sudden it's like they're not in medical school anymore. It's like they haven't been studying for the past 2 years. They really struggle with dedicated, with how to approach it. What is the way to do it? There's a lot of fear, uncertainty, and doubt when it comes to that. And all of that stems from organization. So the problem that people really have when it comes to dedicated is being unprepared, being unorganized, and not having a thorough, robust approach to dedicated. So the solution to that problem is organization. A lot of us feel that we are, sometimes we feel that we're bright in medical school that you got in. You feel that you are confident. You feel that you have the study skills. You've been through almost 2 years of medical school by the time dedicated comes around. But then all of a sudden, a lot of us begin feeling this, fear, uncertainty, and doubt, because this is kind of a new way of studying. This is dedicated time, weeks of time to hone your skills, everything you've learned, consolidate it, and then, synthesize it. What I would like to discuss today is the approach to being organized, the approach to making sure that you will be ready when test day comes around. All right, so now that we've discussed what leads up to dedicated and the planning of it, and the uncertainty that some people have, now we'll come to the solution. So the solution is, again, being organized. And when it comes to being organized, we have to have a good approach to dedicated, something that you will feel confident with going into test day. I've developed a strategy for this. The students have used this and I've gotten very good feedback for it. The way that I do it is as follows. I take a systems-based approach, and so using a book like First Aid, we see there are many sections. I've actually, labeled out each section. For example, cardiology, I've labeled that with tabs. And the way that you should approach dedicated is kind of a systems-based approach. I noticed that many students will open up UWorld or their question bank of choice, and what they'll do is that they will go ahead and just select random and kind of go through things like that and try to synthesize all the information of almost 2 years in a completely random manner. That's not the way to do it. The way to do it is to focus on each section, on each domain, and to master it, and then to move on. Now, of course, there's finite time. Some of us have, 4 weeks of dedicated, some have 6, some have 8, some have even longer than that, and sometimes some people have less time. So what you have to do is you have to devise a strategy that you will cover each topic over the course of the time that you have. Sometimes that's, doing 3 days of GI, followed by 2 days of neurology, followed by, a day or two of pulm or something like that. But however you organize it, and we'll go through this step by step in a future video, you have to make sure that you are taking a systems-based approach, okay? Then what you do is, over the course of time, you will add in self-assessments. So maybe 2 weeks into dedicated, you'll take a UWorld self-assessment. And what that does is that it forces you to then synthesize all this information. And then that way you're learning the synthesis part along with the heavily dedicated part to each section. Additionally, And very importantly, you have to build in free time for yourself. It's very important that during dedicated, you master everything that you are able to master in that time. But sometimes people go way overboard, and what they do is that they work themselves to the bone 7 days a week, and they don't leave any free time, and they burn out after 3 or 4 weeks, when really they would be much more successful taking some free time. We will again discuss that later. Next, I think it's very important that to be able to utilize all the information that you have to be careful not to over diversify. In finance, they call it diversification. So sometimes, you feel that you do a little bit of UWorld, a little bit of, USMLE RX, AMBOSS, you're doing some Sketchy, you're doing some Pathoma. You've got them all in front of you. You've paid for all these subscriptions possibly, and some people just get lost in the details. You have to stick to the gold standards, and we can discuss that also later, but you got to stick to the content that is proven year after year to help medical students be successful on their board examinations. Okay, and so now that we've kind of have a general approach towards this about how to go about studying for dedicated, next I want to talk about some of the self-assessments that you should be taking during dedicated. I feel very strongly about people taking these self-assessments. I think most people do. But what's important for you to do is that treat these self-assessment examinations, whether it's a UWorld self-assessment or something from the NBME, it's important to be able to review those self-assessments and treat them like typical content that you're learning. So self-assessments aren't just to take an examination, be done with it, get your score and say, well, this is where I'm holding. Use that as further prep material for the boards. Lastly, I think that it's important to discuss what the overall day-to-day looks like. Every day should be divided. You should have set hours and time towards specific functions that you're going to be doing. For example, let's say you wake up at 8 a.m. By 8:45, you'll be hitting, UWorld. You should set aside, maybe you'll do a 40 question block, and then you'll stop after 40 questions. You'll review them, and then you'll go on from there and choose to do something else, such as watching, a Boards and Beyond video. Lastly, it's important to know that the day-to-day is very integral and very important to your study habits. So every day should look somewhat the same. Of course, the content is going to be different, but the day overall should have the same flow as the day prior and as the next day will. For example, if you have decided, and we can talk about this in the next video as we go through this in more detail, about what exactly each day looks like. So if you're doing 40 questions in the beginning of the day, followed by content material, followed by another 40 questions later on in the day, then every day should look like that. You have to build a rhythm, you have to build a routine, and you have to build it quickly and early on. That way you can cover as much content as you can. Also, it will help you develop good strategies for learning over the next few weeks in dedicated. So hopefully this gave you a good idea of what dedicated will look like, some of the difficulties that people have with it, and a general approach towards dedicated. In future videos, we'll go ahead and discuss this in a little bit more detail, going through the nitty-gritties and creating a great plan. This is something that I found that even medical students will pay for this information. They're very concerned about it. So I want to make sure that we hone in on this and we develop a great strategy to approaching dedicated. I hope this information was helpful. If you found it helpful, please like, comment, and subscribe to this channel. In the comments, you can also mention anything that you'd like for me to discuss. I'm super happy to help. I've been through this before, and I know that a lot of us have struggled through this and are always looking for more information.